The NBA has so many controversial moments that it's hard to argue the league is not rigged. And if it isn't, then it definitely favors certain players over others. You know who you are. In this video, we're going to break down 10 different NBA theories, and I guarantee you won't believe some of them. As we all know, some people think that when Michael Jordan retired to play baseball, he was actually banned from the NBA for gambling. So let's take a quick look at the facts. Jordan was in the prime of his career when he retired at the age of 30 to play baseball. He had just won 3 straight championships and had already won a gold medal. So why would someone who was already being called the GOAT leave the sport he's best at? That just doesn't make any sense. Well, this is where the story takes a very sad turn. In 1993, something happened that changed the rest of Michael Jordan's life. His dad was unfortunately murdered and the two were extremely close. He even went on the Oprah show to talk about the relationship between him and his dad.
Because that comfort, knowing that he's there, or my mother's there, my family's there, that support, something I really needed it.
Jordan said that his father always wanted him to play baseball, which was the reason he made the choice to switch sports. While this makes complete sense and the story is very sad, some fans still believe that Commissioner David Stern asked Jordan to step away from basketball due to his gambling. This isn't that far-fetched either, because he was known to be an intense gambler, and he was even seen gambling until 2 a.m. before an Eastern Conference Finals game. The Last Dance documentary also showcased how competitive Jordan was in everything he did. I mean, one of his most famous quotes is, "I have a competition problem, a competitive problem." So honestly, it might be a mix of both, but people still to this day think it was because of the card game. Now, this next theory also deals with Commissioner Stern, and honestly, a bunch of these theories do. I guess that's what happens when you have to look over some of the most polarizing NBA players of all time. After the 2011 NBA lockout, everybody thought a trade went through that would change the NBA landscape. Chris Paul was supposedly headed to the Lakers in a 3-way deal that shipped Pau Gasol and Lamar Odom out of LA. This would pair one of the best playmakers in NBA history with Kobe Bryant, who's arguably a top 3 player ever. But that never ended up happening, and the story is actually pretty crazy. David Stern actually rejected the trade, and at first you might be wondering how that's even possible. How can a league commissioner reject a trade for an NBA franchise? I'll let Jeannie Buss, the owner of the Lakers, tell you from a story on the All the Smoke podcast.
Like, David Stern didn't reject the trade as commissioner. He rejected the trade as governor of the New Orleans team.
Basically, David Stern didn't approve the trade because he was one of the owners of the Hornets, which seems kind of fishy if you ask me. The GM of the Hornets at the time did make this trade though, so technically Chris Paul might have been a Laker for a couple minutes, but that didn't last very long. Talk about a power move by my man Stern. But really, do you guys think the NBA should be allowed to own teams? Let us know down in the comments. And number 3 of our top 10 NBA theories, this one makes Knicks fans very, very happy. Let's go back to 1985, which was the first year of the NBA draft lottery. The Knicks were garbage and the league wanted them to be bigger because of how big a market New York is. So what could they possibly do to make the Knicks way better and contend for a championship? Give them a generational talent. They put all the envelopes in a lottery machine and everyone assumed that they had a chance at the number 1 pick because a lottery is random, right? Well, no. The Knicks envelope was bashed to the side of the machine and also folded while all the others were flat. There's even a conspiracy that they froze the card in a freezer so that when Stern felt New York's card, it could be cold and he would pick it. Of course, the commissioner pulled out a card and it was the Knicks. But the story gets even crazier. During the live show of the lottery, the NBA didn't even show the commissioner taking the card out. And now if you try to look at clips, they were all taken down because of copyright. Well, the Knicks ended up landing Patrick Ewing, an 11-time All-Star and one of the 75 best players to ever touch a basketball. I don't know about you, but this conspiracy theory is definitely true. Staying on the topic of an NBA draft being rigged, I have to bring up the latest draft lottery that just took place. This lottery was for the freak of nature Victor Wembanyama, aka the French Slenderman. There were 3 teams with equal chances to win the number 1 pick: the Pistons, the Rockets, and the San Antonio Spurs. And here's what happened. The Pistons got the 5th pick, the Rockets got the 4th, and the Spurs won the number 1 overall pick. But let me explain how this is rigged. The Spurs are notorious for being a well-run organization, Greg Popovich is a Hall of Fame coach, and they clearly know how to create a championship-winning team. Meanwhile, the Pistons have been bad for pretty much the entire 2010s, and the Rockets are middle of the pack in terms of historical significance. And we already know that the NBA always wants their stars to be in big, successful markets, so what did they do? They put the next legendary player on a team that drafted David Robinson and Tim Duncan. This has to be so hard for Pistons and Rockets fans to fathom because Wemby was hyped up like the next LeBron. This next theory is less serious, but there's been a debate about it for years, so let's talk. This guy, who is one of the best Boston Celtics players ever, kinda had a situation. Did Paul Pierce really have to go to the bathroom when he was wheelchaired out of a finals game? Because at first, he admitted on live TV that he did have to go to the bathroom.
Professional man. Whoa. I just had to go to a bathroom.
In the wheelchair?
I had to go to the bathroom.
But then he said he actually didn't go to the bathroom and he hurt himself during the game on Kevin Garnett's podcast.
You know what happened when it was the playoffs when you had to get in the wheelchair? You had to come.
I sprained my MCL.
It was your MCL?
It was my MCL. Yeah.
So really, we have no clue which one it is, but he did end up checking back in a couple minutes later, and he got buckets, ending with 22 points on the night. My guess is that he definitely just had to go to the bathroom and didn't want anyone knowing about it. Shout out to Paul Pierce for all the great content he gives us. For this next one, we're going to travel back in time to March 2nd, 1962 and talk about the alleged best game in NBA history. And if you didn't know by now, I'm talking about Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point outing against the Knicks. Apparently, he scored 100 points and grabbed 25 rebounds while shooting amazing from the field that night. But what if I told you this never happened? Some fans point to the lack of evidence as proof that he never actually did this, and their argument is actually pretty solid. First off, there's no footage of the game anywhere on the internet, and at first this makes sense because it was 1962. But if you look up Wilt's highlights on YouTube, there's compilations of him from around the same time. So why is there no footage of the single greatest performance ever? Aside from old articles and ancient box scores, there really is no way to prove that this game happened, which causes fans to have their speculations. Maybe this was all an act to get more people to watch the NBA at the time, because it certainly wasn't the powerhouse sports league it is today. But him scoring 100 could have happened simply because of who he was playing. We all know that Wilt towered over guys in the early 1960s, and that night he was playing a bad Knicks team, and their starting power forward Phil Jordan didn't play in the game. So realistically, Wilt could have done whatever he wanted on that court, and maybe he went off for 100. You've definitely heard about this next theory involving a famous family, but I bet there's stuff we uncovered that you didn't know. The Kardashians have been plaguing the NBA for years, and the theory says that anybody who's romantically involved with the family will have bad luck. But do you know which NBA player has been affected the most? Let's look at some numbers. Since the start of dating a Kardashian, Kris Humphries has lost the most games with 285 and has the worst win percentage at 44%. Obviously, he hasn't played since 2017, but that's probably a good thing because his team wasn't winning any games with him on the roster, and I blame that solely on Kim Kardashian. Ben Simmons also dated Kendall Jenner, and at first, it looked like he beat the curse and debunked the theory. After they broke up in 2019, Simmons put together a string of all-star appearances, but as we all know, his career took a turn for the worse. In 2021, he held out and demanded to be dealt out of Philly and then sustained a back injury, which would cause him to go from potential all-time great to bench scrub. In the last 2 years, he has only played in 48 games and averages just under 7 points a game. I guess Kendall's curse moves slower than the others. But a player who might have actually cursed the Kardashians is Tristan Thompson because he cheated with multiple women. And the worst part is that Khloe was pregnant with their child at the time. This makes me glad that Thompson was just busted for using steroids. People like to call Shaq and Kobe the greatest duo ever, and there's certainly an argument for it. They won 3 championships together and both were all-stars during their stretch on the same team. But they ended up splitting from each other, and there's a lot of speculation as to why, which is where our next theory comes in. According to some, the two just didn't get along in the locker room and both wanted to be the main guy on the team. And this would make complete sense because both of them were very talented, and if you look at both of their careers, they aren't the most humble guys ever. Some people think there was even more to the story. There's a narrative out there that Kobe Bryant was frustrated with Shaq's lack of commitment and getting better. Since we all know that Kobe is the hardest working player ever, it also makes sense that he would look at Shaq and get mad when he didn't try as hard as him. Either way, this is water under the bridge because Shaq has said he regrets ever feuding with Kobe, and at the end of the day, the two of them were brothers. We miss you, Mamba. Have you ever watched a game and wondered how LeBron James gets every foul call he wants while a random player like Benedict Mathurin might get none? Well, you're not the only one, and this brings up our next theory, and it's about how star players get way more foul calls than other guys. And this would make sense because obviously if you're one of the best players in the league, no one will be able to guard you and they'll have to foul you. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the times when a superstar clearly doesn't get fouled and the refs either call it or switch the call based on their argument. For example, watch this ref call a foul only because MJ asked for it.
He never picked it up and then but he didn't touch it with both hands.
Yeah,
that's the thing. You think so, Michael? 55 hits, 2 to come. Michael, I didn't see 2 hands on him, Michael. But I believe you.
You did.
But I believe you. I only saw the one hand on him.
And remember, this was a washed MJ, so I couldn't imagine what it was like when he was winning championships. So this begs the question, do superstars get special treatment from the refs and league? I would 100% say yes. And what if I told you that I could prove that the NBA was rigged from the opinion of one man, and his name was Tim Donaghy? Donaghy was a referee in the early 2000s, and in 2007, the FBI started an investigation into his work. During this investigation, they found out that Donaghy would tell bookies the status of players and would even make wrong calls to help out certain bets. This would also make him money, and I have to say the greed is out of this world. Donaghy even went on Barstool's Part of My Take podcast and spilled all the tea. He literally admitted that NBA games were fixed and that the NBA wanted fouls to be called at certain times to enhance the game. What's even worse is that he said he wasn't the only ref to do it and that there were always going to be BS calls in games. This really made me mad because while the game isn't solely filled with refs like Donaghy, there's a lot more out there than we think. And now I don't even know if it's all real. Come on, man, this isn't wrestling.